Thank you all for coming. In The Death and Life of Great American Cities, Jacobs was not only insightful, but also prophetic. She warned that neighborhoods that became, quote, outstandingly magnetic, unquote, would attract only the most profitable type of housing, small, expensive apartments for single people. Today they call them luxury condos. She argued that developers only became interested in a neighborhood after it became successful on its own, and that too much investment, cataclysmic money, she called it, would end up destroying a neighborhood rather than saving it. To what extent those predictions and others have come true, and whether they are inevitable, is tonight's topic.
One of the greatest concerns that we have today is how to manage development in the Harlem community. When we started, we were overjoyed with the possibilities of reviving that community. And so, with the help of friends, we were able to begin our development activity. It's been very successful. New schools, affordable housing, a supermarket, pharmacies. Now, everybody's screaming gentrification. And all of a sudden, what we thought was a wonderful thing has become a nightmare.
You know, when the Fifth Avenue Committee got started 29 years ago, it was really one of those vast urban renewal tracts that was leveled by the city and then, you know, left barren because there wasn't enough money. If you've been to Fifth Avenue recently in Park Slope, you know that it's the hot new spot. And interestingly, the American Planning Association just recently named Park Slope one of the 10 best neighborhoods in the country to live in, and they actually cited our work. It's the essence of that community involvement, that activism, that makes it a wonderful place. You know, when the Daily News actually did an article about the APA announcement, they quoted me as saying that people in Park Slope care about everything from, you know, the bike lanes to the war in Iraq, and it's absolutely true.
Today we're seeing investment coming in, and we're seeing communities like Reverend Butt's community, where Abyssinian actually was risk oblivious in going into their neighborhoods, into rehabilitating those areas, becoming the stomping grounds of the risk adverse, coming in right now, building on what people seeded in those communities. And one is sometimes, you know, when I'm working with a community group, they're basically saying, well, maybe we shouldn't improve. Because if we improve, we're going to wind up, you know, attracting outsiders and we're going to be displaced. But that's not an alternative. That's not the kind of balance we should be seeking. When you get a developer coming into Brooklyn who can call the governor and the senator and the mayor and work with them to get a deal to bypass the city review processes and can then put forward a plan that uses the power of the state to take property from private individuals, be they old-timers or new-timers, that came into that neighborhood, and put forth a plan without the public being involved in a decision about what should take place. There's something wrong. If we're really talking about the over-successful city, we have to begin to think about what is success. Do we want it to be measured by a loss of diversity? Do we want it to be measured by the displacement of people who put their lives into building the businesses and into making the neighborhoods? How do we make sure communities are engaged? How do we make sure there's ways to develop permanent affordable housing? Not through community benefits agreements, but through policies that mandate that we have affordable housing in every development that we build, no matter where in the city.
You know, just to go back to what Jacobs means by over-successful, she says it's the closest thing in urban development to killing with kindness, meaning the very process that rescues the neighborhood then kind of continues and takes it into another direction. It's not a question of whether it destroys the neighborhood rather than saving it. It destroys the diversity after saving the neighborhood. I think the innovation of community benefits agreement are, however shaky they may be, these first few that have happened, I think it gives you something of a template to try and do in public what often gets done behind closed doors.
The issues that are being covered in any community benefits agreement, be it Atlantic Yards or be it West Harlem, should become part of city policy. Affirmative hiring, that should be part of our city policy so that we make sure that the unions are integrated, the construction jobs are integrated, and there's an opportunity for people of color and young men to get into building trades. Affordability, it should be part of city policy, not based on area median income that uses Connecticut and the suburbs, but based on the median income of the communities in which we're building.
Can I just interject a brief definition, if I may, of community benefits agreements for the audience, for the benefits of the audience here? They are agreements between members of the community who are not elected, who it can be very random who ends up in the room. It can be through a deliberate process, and they negotiate directly with the developer who wants to put through some sort of zoning change, and negotiate basically a set of benefits. A certain percentage of affordable housing will be included here. A certain percentage of jobs will be reserved or at least targeted to community people. A certain number of apprenticeship positions, et cetera, et cetera. And that comes, and that will basically build political support in the community and encourage the local city councilors or state legislators to support the project once it goes through the formal legislative process.
To me, community benefits agreement at this point, and my perspective on them has changed, obviously, especially given the Atlantic Yards community benefits agreement. To me, they're a symptom of government's failure to protect the public good.
Atrophy seems to have set in. That the generation of community folk out there now are not as strong and as engaged, that could be our fault too, as they once were.
The civic involvement, the civic engagement, that was so much a part of my identity growing up. People are just struggling to connect with their family, much less their community.
Okay, we have time for a few questions.
In the almost 20 years that I've been in New York, I've witnessed, like everyone, a lot of mom and pop shops going under. And to me, that's a real huge example of the over-successful city and a kind of failure. And I was wondering, for the long-standing mom and pop shops, if any of you know of any successful strategies, either public or private, to help keep the old-timers in business.
I would like to think I was part of that in Fort Greene. I ran for a couple of years, the Merchants Association there. And Bogolan is an African word that means mud cloth, and so many of them tended to be Afrocentric. So for those who know this particular stretch of Fulton Street, the fact that Night of the Cookers or 4W Circle, South Portland Antiques, the fact that these shops are still there 10 years after I was working with them is a success, and it was something I obsessed over. What made the difference was immediately when this question came up, because we could see it. You could see it from the mid-90s what was going to happen. The thing I emphasized over and over again was, if you want to stay, you'll either need a 25-year lease or you're going to need to own your property. For a lot of people, the loss of a particular mom and pop is very different from the loss of all the mom and pops, which by and large is not a danger in most neighborhoods, even the very hot ones.
Thank you all for coming. Let me tell you that you can continue, however, this discussion online, as all discussions continue these days, at futureofny.org. That's the website for this exhibit, and the exhibit itself will be open until January 26th. Thank you all for coming and have a good night.